Hi, my name is Chuck Miller, and this is my presentation on domain fronting for IS 701 with Dr. Augusto Casas. To understand domain fronting, we must first understand that it is a type of web traffic obfuscation, which generally we can define as the concealment of internet traffic from surveillance through technological means. Obfuscation is popular among journalists and hacktivists for obvious reasons, but in countries with stricter internet laws, it can be popular among civilians as well. Its usages are most commonly seen in the Tor web browser, which is the Onion router. Tor uses a decentralized routing protocol that routes traffic through multiple other locations in the Onion network before sending to the desired location, providing both privacy and anonymization for its users. Tor's multi-layered encryption gives its routers a sort of plausible deniability in that they truly do not know the original sender or destination unless they are the first or last router in the chain. This makes Tor traffic highly resistant to things like fingerprinting and surveillance. The Tor browser also offers users a series of add-ons to help further protect themselves called Tor pluggable transports. These are basically API add-ons that give users more robust control over the obfuscation measures being used to protect this web traffic. The Meek pluggable for Tor was designed at UC Berkeley in 2015 and was released alongside the first academic paper written about domain fronting. This pluggable allowed users to hide their true destination of their traffic in an encrypted tunnel to a Meek server that was typically hosted on a popular CDN like Amazon or Google. The Meek server would then function as a hidden proxy forwarding traffic to its true destination, but keeping it concealed from any would-be state-sponsored censorship. Many of us agree that obfuscation is truly important for all internet users as it gives us the thing that has made the internet great since day one: freedom of privacy. This means freedom from government spying, which we in America know all too well, freedom from unethical data collection. Companies like Google and Facebook mine and sell our data every day. Many of us seek to avoid that. And freedom of information. As I mentioned before, countries that censor their citizens often do so to increase the effectiveness of their own propaganda. Sometimes obfuscation is a user's only means of accessing something like world news. However, this comes at a cost. As with anything, there are those that would abuse their internet freedoms to commit crimes or cause harm. Obfuscation methods like domain fronting are used to conceal drug, weapon, and even human trafficking communications, bypass security infrastructure, and as Patrick Gray recently put it, one man's privacy tool is another man's C2 framework. Hackers have long used domain fronting to conceal their communications with devices infected by malware. So, what is domain fronting? It is a method of web traffic obfuscation that abuses HTTP packet headers in a way that forces a content delivery network's edge server to proxy traffic between the client and a hidden location within the same CDN. So within every HTTPS packet, there are 3 locations where a destination address appears. That's in the DNS header, which is sent to public DNS in exchange for the corresponding IP address. It's in the server name indication header, or SNI. Often a web server with one IP address will be hosting multiple different domains, so this SNI header tells the web server specifically which domain on that IP address we are requesting. And finally, the host header, which is a remnant from HTTP 1.1, and it's still required to be in all HTTP requests. So, as we can see here on the right, the DNS and SNI headers are the HTTPS packet headers and are therefore left unencrypted. However, the HTTP host header is contained within the encrypted HTTPS packet payload, allowing us to conceal our true destination there. Okay, so I've designed this little infographic to help explain how domain fronting works. In 2020, Eric Hunstad said this great quote that I really like. You can think of domain fronting like a postcard inside an envelope. So let's view it in that regard. First, we have the HTTP packet or postcard with our host header addressed to blocked.example.com, which is going to serve as our true destination for this. The entire HTTP packet is then encrypted and placed inside the payload of an HTTPS packet, where only the HTTPS packet headers are left unencrypted for routers to view. We can address our HTTPS packet headers to something like allowed.example.com, which is a website that we know uses the same content delivery network as our blocked site, to host their web services. Now, to any sensors between the client and a content delivery network, the packets would all appear to be addressed to allowed.example.com and would be allowed, hopefully, to pass through to the CDN hosting that website. Then, at the edge instance of the content delivery network, the edge server will decrypt the packet, read the host header, and upon noticing that the address in the host header is hosted on the same CDN, it's going to proxy the packet to the true destination. So I've included the logo here of a few sites currently blocked by the Great Firewall of China as an example of sites that censored users may wish to visit using this kind of censorship circumvention. Unfortunately, as discussed in my earlier slides, if there is a machine on our network that has been compromised without our knowledge, these same techniques could be used to bypass any alerts that would be set off were our firewall to see an internal machine communicating with a known malicious website, or even uploading something like a lot of data to an unexpected domain. In my research on this topic, I noticed a lot of claims that domain fronting was dead or no longer viable as a means of obfuscation for hackers and penetration testers. This is largely due to, as of 2018, AWS and Google App Engine stopped forwarding packets with mismatching SNI and host headers. This effectively blocked domain fronting. Although there was a presentation by Eric Hunstad in 2020 at DEF CON where he proved you could still front through AWS CloudFront using the new TLS version 1.3's encrypted SNI or ESNI header. He calls this technique domain hiding. Even with Amazon and Google out of the question, I wanted to choose a large and reputable CDN to try and domain front traffic through. CloudFlare serves 152 regions globally and does not explicitly block domain fronting traffic. It also allows the creation of a static website using only a free account, and it's large enough to cause too much quote-unquote collateral damage for any would-be censors wishing to block the traffic. This means blocking CloudFlare.com would be turning off a large portion of the internet for your users. Too large for a censor to do it. So in order to front some traffic, we're going to need a few things. We're going to need a static website hosted on Cloudflare CDN to serve as our hidden website. This is going to be domainfronter.pages.dev. A public website known to host using Cloudflare that we could potentially domain front our traffic through, and a way to manipulate the HTTP headers within the encrypted HTTPS packet. Here we can see the tools that I use for this test. We have my Cloudflare dashboard open to the Pages tab, where we can see my website connected to a GitHub repo. The site domainfronter.pages.dev hosts a very simple index.html file and a text file, df.txt, containing the string domain fronting works. Also, finding websites that use Cloudflare was very easy. I Googled the results and tossed them into a text file that I plan on using for the DNS queries in the next slide. Proof of concept. So for anyone checking my sources, I am closely following Vincent Yu's 2017 proof of concept. First, we query public DNS for the CNAME records of all of our known Cloudflare websites. These CNAME records may contain telltale signs of a viable domain fronting proxy. Basically, any CNAME record that points to a .cloudflare.com instance, it will likely work as a proxy. So here we can see I use a pretty simple dig query. The TAC-F flag is used for batch mode, repeating the command over a list of all of the subdomains that we're passing it. TAC-T to specify which record type we're looking for, obviously CNAME. We pipe this into a grep search for the telltale.cloudflare.com, and we can see our results below. Should be noted, when I ran this query back in September of 2022, all 10 websites came back with a cloudflare.com address listed in their CNAME record. Now that we have some potentially frontable domains, let's give them a try using the same wget parameters as used in Yu's 2017 proof of concept. So, TAC-Q for quiet mode. TAC-O outputs to a file, but if you pass it a dash as the file name, it just prints the response to standard output, which is what we want. And TAC-U demo allows us to pass a customized host header. It's a bit more robust than that, but that's what we're using it for here, so that's how we're going to explain it. Here, we see the address of the first potentially viable domain from our list, zeroshoes.com. And here we also request the df.txt file that we know exists on our separate domain fronter website, not zeroshoes.com. Were you to browse to zeroshoes.com/df.txt using a regular browser like Firefox or Chrome, you would get a file not found error, as that file is not being hosted on that web server. Finally, with the tac header parameter, we add a host header addressed to a completely different location, our website, domainfronter.pages.dev. Run the command, and we see we get a response. Domain fronting works, the contents of our df.txt file. Here we can see the Zero Shoes web server, which would be located on the Content Delivery Network's edge nearest to our geographical location. This Zero Shoes web server works as a proxy server, automatically exchanging communications between our two endpoints. So, success, right? We successfully fronted our traffic through the zeroshoes.com web domain with practically little to no difficulty. Any outside sensors or firewalls would only see us communicating with zeroshoes.com via the unencrypted HTTPS packet headers. But what about websites that don't leave this information in their public CNAME records? As I tested more and more known CloudFlare sites, I came across a few that didn't have this telltale CNAME record. And as shown with nginx.com here, didn't get any response to the GET request. Not to be deterred, I prepared myself for what I assumed would be a difficult task of figuring out what wasn't working here. I tried the two addresses listed in nginx.com's CNAME records, ns.nginx and hostmaster.nginx. No luck. But on a whim, I tried the most commonly seen subdomain, www, and to my surprise, it worked. So why is www.nginx.com proxying our fronted traffic to the hidden destination, especially when the CNAME records point to locations that refuse to proxy this same traffic? Obviously, Nginx does not publicly disclose the details of their internal routing, but this does lead us to a simpler and potentially more effective question. If www works on nginx.com, could we brute force other common subdomains to find more viable domain fronting proxies? Brute forcing subdomains. So fuzzing is a brute force technique that attempts to identify entities of a given type on a server by resending the same request over and over again, each time replacing one or many parameters with those from a list of commonly seen entities of the same type. Penetration testers or hackers can then look through these responses for any variations that might indicate the existence of the entity we're looking for. So, for example, if a hacker were to send the same login request to a web server 1,000 times, each time with a different commonly seen username, they might get back 999 responses that each took 84 milliseconds, and one response that took 105 milliseconds. They can then assume that that one outlier is actually an existing username and begin targeting that user specifically. For our purposes, as you can kind of see in the background here, we will be writing a script that sends multiple wget commands to a given domain, fuzzing in new subdomains from a list of commonly used subdomains. Any subdomain that returns our df.txt file, domain fronting works, is printed to standard out as a known working domain fronting proxy. Here's a peek at the Python code I used for this. I have it all hosted on my GitHub, posted in the description below. We can see it basically just runs a while loop and iterates through a file containing a list of the top 1,000 most commonly used subdomains. For that list, I'm using a list from a GitHub repo that is also in the description below. Each iteration, it sends the same wget command with our custom parameters, but replaces the subdomain each time with the next item on the list. If the output equals domain fronting works, the contents of our df.txt file, it then prints the address as a ready-to-use domain fronting proxy. Fuzzing nginx.com. So using domainfuzzer.py, we attempt to brute force the top 1,000 subdomains over nginx.com for ones that successfully proxy our traffic. Lo and behold, it worked. We also identified 3 additional subdomains that successfully proxied our traffic: pages, CDN, and email. Here, we confirm that these subdomains all work as domain fronting proxies, each time getting the same response of our df.txt file. Fuzz all the things, right? So we have a working Python script. Why not test it out on more and more CloudFlare sites, right? Here's global news agency, Bloomberg.com, and the responses. And e-commerce site, Shopify.com. And Medium.com. I'll let you guys look at that one for a second. Nearly every subdomain tested worked on Medium.com. Okay, we've proven domain fronting still works, and with some very basic penetration testing methods, we built a brute force script to identify additional viable subdomains. But how do we prevent this from happening within our own environment? How do we detect a compromised machine attempting to hide communication with domain fronting? Step one is an HTTPS decrypting firewall, or what's commonly known as a corporate man-in-the-middle. This firewall would use local root certs to complete the TLS handshake for any outgoing HTTPS requests, allowing this firewall to decrypt all outbound traffic and inspect it for SNI and host header mismatches, effectively blocking domain fronting. The only downside to this solution is that it is expensive, both in the economic and computational sense. Depending on the amount of outbound traffic, this firewall may require a lot of resources, or may even need additional firewalls to balance the load. Typically, latency is negligible with these kinds of solutions, but unexpected peaks in outbound traffic could cause bandwidth issues. What about external actors fronting their traffic through our CDN-hosted domains? In this scenario, deterrence is going to be a more effective solution than prevention. Domain fronting actually poses little threat to the domain proxying the traffic between the two endpoints. So unless there is a considerable amount of traffic getting fronted through our domain, the cost is going to be more or less trivial. In 2020, 21% of the top 100,000 domains still allowed domain-fronted traffic. And as shown in the test results from the previous slide, there are still a lot of viable subdomains for people to choose for their domain-fronting proxies. Not to mention, if decrypting all outbound traffic is resource expensive, then the cost of decrypting all traffic altogether is likely going to be more than double that cost. By simply updating our CNAME records to exclude any exact instance addresses, we can implement a sort of principle of least privilege for external users. Any publicly accessible information, meaning DNS records, should be regularly audited by the company. The company should be asking itself, what is the minimum amount of information a user needs to utilize our web services? The future of domain fronting. So as we've shown, domain fronting still works in 2022. Viable proxies were easily identified and used to front our traffic through the CloudFlare CDN, and after we built a brute force script to enumerate subdomains, we no longer needed to dig through those DNS queries for CNAME records that had likely viable subdomains. When you see a slide with nearly 1,000 viable subdomains for a type of web traffic smuggling, like we did with Medium.com, you may be wondering if that domain is at risk. The short answer is maybe, probably not. It depends how much traffic is being fronted through your domain. Proxying uses resources. Resources cost money. If more and more users wishing to conceal their web traffic start using your subdomains, this may become a problem. If an APT or a well-known hacker group makes extensive use of your domains for fronting their nefarious traffic, government censors have a tendency to block first and ask questions later. You potentially could get closed off from an entire global market regionally without knowing about it. Domain fronting is dead was a really common security news article from around 2018 when Amazon and Google both banned it. However, it wasn't long after that security researchers started finding loopholes and domain fronting evolved into things like domain hiding with the use of the ESNI header. More recently, Microsoft joined the club, announcing that Microsoft Azure will now block any HTTP request that exhibits domain fronting behavior. This seemed to reignite the claims of domain fronting's inevitable demise. However, this news comes with a few caveats, right? Admins have to open a support request with Microsoft in order to implement this on any Azure resources that existed prior to November 8th, 2022, which is basically all of them. So there's a pretty good likelihood that many Azure admins are either going to ignore this update or forget to place a request in for all of their domains or what have you. Basically, the human element is only reliable in that it will remain unreliable. I think it's safe to say that domain fronting is far from dead. Despite countless attempts to thwart it as an obfuscation technique since its discovery in 2015, we're still able to use it on many of the world's largest CDNs. And just like any good hacking technique, domain fronting doesn't die, it just evolves into something better. Thanks for watching. I've posted my LinkedIn, Mastodon, and GitHub repos in the description. Please feel free to reach out with any questions or things you think I may have missed. This topic has really inspired me over the last couple of months, so don't hesitate to connect and share any new information you've been researching on web traffic obfuscation or really InfoSec in general. This is obviously my YouTube channel, and I plan to post more cybersecurity research here as I work towards getting this paper published. Fingers crossed, like and subscribe.